Now we're going to call up the painters.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And we're going to be implementation of the paint stewardship programs in Canada, Oregon, and California. We have Mark Kirshner with Product Care, Allison Keene with the American Coatings Association, Paint Care, Lorraine Segala, President of Amazon Environmental, and Jerry Knoll, the President of Visions Paint Recycling, Inc. Thank you very much. Again, this whole hearing, I'll apologize for being late. But Mr. Kirshner, please begin with your testimony.
I'm Mr. Kirshner, and Allison Keene and myself have been working together on this Oregon program, so I thought I'd ask Allison if she...
I think
Please.
it makes a little bit more sense for me to start.
Please, Allison.
So first and foremost, thank you so much, members of the committee, for having us today. I'm Allison Keene. I'm a VP for Government Affairs with the American Coatings Association, but I'm also the executive director of our new nonprofit product stewardship organization, Paint Care. So I'm wearing two different hats today, but basically ACA is a trade organization. We represent much more than just architectural paint manufacturers. Paint Care was put in place to do the pilot program in Oregon and implement any other state, which California will be the second of, just made up of architectural paint manufacturers, just focused on end-of-life management for post-consumer paint. So Paint Care is currently piloting the first U.S. product stewardship program for paint in Oregon. We just got started in July. California would be the second, and the implementation date is for 2012. And thanks to Huffman getting the legislation passed last year. This has really been a culmination of a national dialogue that we started with the Product Stewardship Institute, and California was heavily a participant in the old California Integrated Waste Management Board, now CalVercycle, because as you've heard today, paint is usually the #1 product that comes through the HHW programs at your local governments. And as they could no longer afford the cost, they asked the industry to look at a product stewardship model that would work to reduce that burden. We've introduced legislation across the United States in the last 3 years based on the dialogue and based on model legislation, looking at the Canadian programs and, quite frankly, picking the BC program, as Neil said, and as I'll introduce Mark Kirshner. We supported the legislation across the United States, including in California, because we believe that it is our definition of product stewardship that it is a shared responsibility for all folks in the life cycle of the product, all the way from manufacturer down to the consumer. And that's what the California bill does. Makes an even level playing field for all manufacturers and all producers, and it basically allows the consumer to make an informed decision when they're buying paint and know that there's not only an environmental but an economic cost to how they use it and how they may or may not dispose of it. We don't believe that product stewardship is a principle merely to shift the burden from consumers or taxpayers onto producers. If we are going to run a program, we have to own the program. We have to be able to finance and operate it on our terms, set our own goals, which I just heard, and basically use a market-based system so that it's fair and economical for everybody involved. So with that, given the interest of time, I'd love to answer questions, but I'll introduce you to Mark Kirshner, who's our expertise in the program. They've been running these programs in Canada for a very long time. They're a program manager in Oregon. We intend to have them as our program manager to implement California as well. After you hear from him, if you want to know a little bit more about how it actually operates, I'll be more than happy to do that as well.
Okay, thanks, Allison. I'm Mark Kirshner, President of Product Care Association. We're another nonprofit association. We're one of the stewardship companies Neil referred to. There are several of them in British Columbia. We're based in Vancouver. We've been running the paint stewardship program in British Columbia since 1994, so we've got now 17 years of experience doing that, and watched the steady climb of the percentage of leftover paint that we bring in the door. It hasn't plateaued yet. We're at about 9%, so 100 gallons get sold, we get back almost 9 of them in the program. Ideally, we'd get none of it back. Allison says this many a time, it would end up where it's supposed to be on the walls, but people don't always seem to buy the right amount that they should. The paint stewardship program concept has moved to other provinces, which I think you've heard. We're now running out of our Vancouver office program in Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. We'll be starting programs in Manitoba and Newfoundland. And it was just almost 2 years ago, I think we were having a similar presentation in the Salem, Oregon, and talking about the legislation coming there, and we were very pleased to be involved working with Paint Care, American Coatings Association, in implementing the Oregon program. So we're the folks who deliver the program. If you've got any questions on how it works, it's a nonprofit, as I said. It's an all-industry board. We're not just doing paint. We also do other products depending on the province, flammable liquids like solvents, pesticides, fluorescent lamps. We started last year in British Columbia, the CFLs and the tubes. Again, it's an industry extended producer responsibility approach. We're just working on the small appliances program that will launch soon. We work on an e-waste program in Saskatchewan, so we've started to branch out, not just doing programs for our own membership, but sometimes other programs such as Paint Care come along and say, can you help us get our program up and running? Cost-wise, I think that's one of the big issues people have. I know there was a comparison done of what it is costing now in California. That was done a couple of years ago. We shared data with what's now Cal Recycle, and the numbers I recall were about $10 a gallon managed in California, and more like $6 in the British Columbia program. And to boot, we were recovering a much higher percentage. So job, I think, being better done, cost-wise at least, and being done more effectively as well. So anyway, that's just a sort of a quick overview of how we do what we do, and happy to answer questions.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Segala, the CEO of Amazon Environmental. We're a California-based paint recycler located in San Bernardino and Riverside counties. We employ 11 full-time people and about 3 additional full-time equivalents as seasonal workers. We have also locations in other states in the country. Our primary business is the recycling of leftover paints into useful products. We have been doing this since 1992. We have been involved in the paint product stewardship program along with Mark and Allison for 8 years, at least 8 years. We spent probably $50,000 in donations, travel, and employee time working with them to promote extended producer responsibility in California as well as other states. We also participated in and have benefited from a grant that the state of California gave that allowed standards to be set for the quality of recycled paint. So that's Master Painters Institute and Green Seal, and we participated in that. We pay money every year to be audited and inspected to make sure that our paint meets the same quality standards as new paint. We've also our paint costs less than virgin. I'm sure Jerry's going to get into that as well. Just as we expect that if, as AB 1343 is implemented, we should hire between 30 and 100 additional employees and probably open a few additional facilities throughout the state. Our average compensation, just to let you know what type of jobs, and I'm talking about the labor force, this is the people opening the cans and making paint, not the management, is about $40,000 a year. We provide benefits, vacation, profit sharing. So these are very well thought of, highly sought jobs in the industry. We're looking forward to the implementation of AB 1343. We don't consider this a fee. It's really you pay as you go. If you generate trash, you pay for the trash. You generate hazardous waste or recyclables, you pay for the recycling of it. So some people use all their paint. They may have to pay for this as well, but generally there is a leftover amount, and it seems fair that everyone should have, that if you generate it, if you use it, you should pay for it. And Allison may not want me to say this, but in the beginning, 8-10 years ago, paint industry was highly resistant to this program. They didn't want to do it. So the fact that we have them at the table here now and they're willing to do it and the manufacturers are willing to fund it is really a milestone, and hopefully California will not turn that away.
One more justification for my optimism.
It's really fantastic that they're here and willing to do it. And of course, as a paint manufacturer, I'll be paying that fee as well. Curious.
Well, I would like to touch on a couple of those things as well. I am Jerry Noel. I'm the president of Visions Recycling here in McClellan, California, a base closure. And we also will be creating jobs if this is passed and implemented. I'm also, and I've spoken out before, that getting industry, retailers, government, federal and state together and agreeing that this is the best way to go was absolutely astounding. Based on the first meeting where I think last time I said things were almost thrown, to a point where now we're saying, okay, well, let's get ahead of the curve and get this done before its deadline is incredible. I think that the environment isn't Republican or Democrat. I think that if this is good, it creates jobs. We will be creating as well a lot of jobs locally here once this is passed. And we have a commitment to that. Good jobs, local jobs, and keeping our resources as far as paint here in the United States instead of exported out to third world countries. I think that's very important to the environment. It also relieves burden from the government. If private industry is paying for that, Cal Recycle can concentrate their efforts on a lot of other things that currently they can't get to. Rob Darcy mentioned that 5% of his population is being reached. This program, as a large part of it, Allison will agree or disagree, is education to the consumer, which means we're talking with them. If we're talking with them, those quantities are going to go up. And if it's $35 million now and we're reaching 5%, if we reach 50, how much of a government responsibility is there? Let private industry do it. Regulate themselves. And of course, create a tax base. Create more jobs, get more taxes, so we can all meet like this again. This is really, really good. So anyways, that's about all I have to say on that. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Noel. I know the regulations are not final, they're just being promulgated, but can you comment or compare and contrast the British Columbia regulations on paint with the proposed California regs?
I think it's actually simpler to compare and contrast the regulation that they have now that started out as legislation and our legislation, because they really don't have a lot of regulatory prescriptive things behind it. So the big difference in British Columbia is there's almost no prescription. In California and United States, Oregon, Vermont, Connecticut, Minnesota, any place we've had it, we needed antitrust protection to put in this sustainable financing system, to basically put in a process whereby the funding to paint care for my manufacturers is transparently passed along through the retail purchase price of paint, and it doesn't put a manufacturer or a retailer at any competitive disadvantage. It's not part of their margins, not part of their market. It's a simple, straight pass-through. And that was key to us in having legislation. All producers have to be part of it, so there's no free ridership, and there's a sustainable financing mechanism that we get some limited antitrust protection for, so that we're not, all arrested for price fixing. And that is the main difference, I think, between the British Columbia program and their regs or legislation and our legislation. As far as goals that we'll set and transparency and annual reporting, all very similar. The only other, I think it's similar for paint but different for other products. The only other difference I would say is in British Columbia and here, we don't have a collection goal. Jerry's probably right. The more we promote, the more paint we may initially get, but Mark is also right. I often say if we're doing our jobs, we should have zero. We do not make paint to be thrown away. It should be used. And if we are communicating with the public and telling them first and foremost that there's an issue and they need to do a better job of buying right, and we facilitate that buying right, we actually may see a decrease. At the very least, hopefully what we'll see is better quality paint being brought in before a 10 or 20-year mark when you move, so that Visions and Amazon have a higher quality to use for their recycled products.
Are there outstanding issues with DTSD on paint management? We had a hearing earlier, and I just want your comments on that.
Yeah, so right now in California, you folks are the only one that have a presumptively hazardous waste designation for latex. Oil-based paint is hazardous no matter where you go in the United States. The other problem, though, is oil-based paint is held to a little bit higher standard in California. So this is probably going to be a discussion we're going to have quite quite soon. We would like to change, from a policy perspective, the regulations in California so that any collection site operating under the paint care program would be able to take latex and oil-based paint. If it's a program product, let them take it, let us transport it and get it recycled or properly disposed of. Right now, depending on your permit status, you would only be able to take latex. You may not be able to take oil. And what we don't want to do is have a consumer come and you only take a couple products and you have to send them someplace else for really oil-based paint, which is that's what you want to get in. That is the hazardous. So you really want to get that in. You don't want to turn somebody away and perhaps have them dump it someplace else or put it in the garbage. So we will be coming back to you and looking for some relief from a legislative standpoint for that.
Members? The author, Mr. Huffman.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, not just for this hearing, but also for including paint prominently in it. And this was one of those issues where really a lot of the hard work, as some of the witnesses have testified, had occurred over a period of years. And I was just lucky enough to receive this issue, you know, right at the culmination of all that work and be able to help be part of getting it over the finish line. But I wanted to just commend all of you for working together. It was refreshing to work with an industry that really was ready and embraced the concept of stepping up and doing right by product stewardship. So that was great. And the one question I had, I think one of the witnesses talked about the price difference in unit cost of recycling between Canada and the United States. And I'm curious to know that whether you included the healthcare difference. Because obviously anything we do here in the United States, every one of those jobs carries with it the burden of health care on top of it. And in Canada, you don't have to do that. That's a significant part of employment costs in our country.
Yeah, I don't want to wade into that issue if I don't have to. But, you know, I don't know the answer to that, but that could be part of the difference. I don't think it'd be all of the difference by any stretch, but that could be part of it.
Yeah, it was a 40% difference, right?
Roughly, yeah.
Right. Well, might be pretty close. Yeah.
But if I can interrupt, I will say that we've started to have some preliminary results out of Oregon, and I have to tell you that through this dialogue that we've all been a part of, the worst or the most expensive was King County, Seattle, and they were managing at $1.12 a gallon for post-consumer paint. We are now doing a little closer to Canada. We are doing that now in Oregon for about $6. And we hope in California, with a much more robust infrastructure and more recyclers on hand, market-based approach, we can get that even lower. So we are starting to see some results in the United States, even with our high cost of labor and other regulatory costs.
I'd like to say one other thing, too, is that this program is paid for at the time you purchase the paint. And I've been 25 years as a painting contractor. A painting contractor doesn't have an outlet for their leftover materials. They don't want to become a small use generator of waste, so they hide it. They collect it. They store it. They will be able to clear out their storage facilities, get rid of all that product, get it back into the flow of recycling, and manage their waste stream much better.
Well, for all of the space in attics and garages everywhere that you have freed up, I want to thank you.
I was going to say you might damage the storage industry, you know, because of all the space that's freed up in people's garages that they could stop renting the storage unit. You know?
They can buy new stuff to fill it. So
that's right.
Prop up the economy.
Not subsidizing them.
I'd like to thank the panel for their testimony and educating all of us here on the committee. And now we'll move to carpet.